is April 5, 1987. For the oral history project of Historic Madison, I, Lorraine Orchard, am talking with Beatrice Walker Lampert, L-A-M-P as in Peter, E-R-T, Mrs. Harold Lampert of Madison, Wisconsin. Mrs. Lampert is a very well-known Madisonian. She was one of the first women lawyers to attain prominence not only in Madison but in the state of Wisconsin. I asked her how she happened to come to Wisconsin.
I was educated through high school in Nebraska, but my sister was teaching at a little college called Mount Union in Alliance, Ohio, and she wanted my mother and myself to come there for at least my freshman year at college, which we did. And then she wanted to get her doctorate at the University of Wisconsin, which had a splendid reputation at that time. So the whole group of us came to Wisconsin. They obtained it here, and I registered in law school.
Now, you, I believe, are not the only woman in law school, but weren't you the only one in your freshman class?
Well, I think I probably was. It's hard to remember now. That's a long time ago. There were other women who graduated, but most of them did not practice here. I remained in Madison, and all my practice was in Madison.
All right. When you graduated, I happen to know, and you're probably too modest to say, you were elected to Joith. Would you just make a statement for the record for someone who wouldn't know what Joith is?
Joith is the honorary organization for law school. All students throughout the country of law schools. It's a national group.
Well, I know it's a very significant honor. After you finished law school, did you get a job right away?
Not immediately. I was married the day after I finished law school, and I think I had a son before before venturing into the business world. But later on, when he was old enough to go to nursery school, I did start practice in the city attorney's office first. I was assistant city attorney.
What sort of things do city attorneys do?
Well, it's a smaller copy of the state regulatory bodies. That is, you try cases for violation of city ordinances. We had a little court called Superior Court at that time, and I had to go over there frequently to try speeding cases, other violations of motor vehicle law, that sort of thing.
Well, then, do you happen to remember how many years you were there? It doesn't matter, but approximately.
Well, just a few years.
Mm-hmm. Then what did you do next?
I went into state service. Way back at that time, the mayor of Madison happened to be Al Schmedeman, and he was elected governor of Wisconsin. When there seemed to be a general move across the street from the city hall after he was elected governor. Anyway, I was appointed. I took a civil service examination and was appointed as an examiner of the Public Service Commission. It was our function to hear cases for the commission, to which they would decide on applications for authority to conduct utilities or something of that sort.
Is that their chief? That's their chief job then. Utilities. Do they do anything else?
Oh yes, they had a new law providing for licensing of out-of-state vehicles that came into the city, which operated for hire. They classified them as common carriers or contract carriers, and we'd conduct the hearings on the applications and refer our recommendations to the commission to decide.
Now, did you, maybe you can't generalize, but did you ever feel discriminated against in those earlier years because you were a woman, or didn't you sense anything like that?
Well, I was lucky, but I proceeded through civil service a lot, which doesn't discriminate. I took examinations from time to time when they were needed. However, when I was appointed as Assistant Attorney General, it was by John Martin, Attorney General, because he knew my work. He had known Ted Lewis, who was city attorney when I was assistant. And so that, I was on the civil service list. I had passed the examination, so his appointment was perfectly legal, even if...
Well, civil service, I think, probably was a great boon for women then, don't you think?
It was indeed.
For now, it is for anybody, but I would think even 20 years ago would have been a great boon for women.
See, I started practice in the 1920s, and there were very, very few women lawyers, at least very few that were outstanding. Some of them might practice for a while and get married, and let it go at that.
After the Public Service Commission, then next
Next was with the Attorney General.
for the state of Wisconsin.
That's right.
All right. What sort of cases did you have there?
Well, mostly labor cases. I represented the Labor Relations Board. And they preceded the National Labor Relations Board. The whole law in Wisconsin was new, and it was an example for the federal law. So we broke the ice for the National Labor Relations Board. And for years, we were just an example throughout the country of labor regulation. Of course, I had many cases in both the Wisconsin Supreme Court and United States Supreme Court, and the other cases were real trials for people who had violated one of the labor board's organizations. So it was a very busy field.
Can you remember any particular cases that you were pleased about or displeased or happy?
There were so many of them. It was a very busy field. Yes, I was up in, let me see, I was going to say Green Bay, but it wasn't, Fond du Lac, for a long time for a trial, and another over on the east coast of Wisconsin, and for a long, long trial in Milwaukee, where people had violated the board's order. We tried them, and they were punished to the extent that it was necessary to secure violation of the board's order.
Well, what sort of violations would people or companies or individuals commit?
What they called unfair labor practices. If unions exerted too much, or employees exerted too much force, that was verboten. And if the employers did something unfair to try to discourage organization, that was considered an unfair labor practice. So they were required to do whatever the board had ordered to remedy what wrong they had done.
Well, Wisconsin's a leader then in that field, isn't it? Wisconsin is really a leader
It is
in
indeed.
that field.
The whole labor relations regulation of the United States is based on the same principles as Wisconsin's earlier law.
Can you remember being admitted to the Supreme Court or your first case there, the United States Supreme Court?
Yes, I do remember. complete your paperwork, but you have to have somebody present to move your admission. That's just the custom. And it should be a member of the Supreme Court. I wrote Senator McCarthy to ask if he would move my admission. He wrote back and said he'd be delighted. When I got to the clerk's office, he asked who was moving my admission. I told him Senator McCarthy. The clerk said, he can't move your admission. He's not a member of the court.
Oh.
And my opponent, the lawyer who was going to oppose me in the argument, had a good laugh. He said, well, I'll move your admission. I know I'm going to win this case anyway.
Did he?
No, he didn't.
He didn't, but he still was nice enough to move your admission. Oh. Who were some of the Supreme Court justice or Chief Justice or any famous ones that you appeared before, either in your first one or?
Well, Frankfurter and Black had their usual arguments. I think they did most of my argument for me. I got probably half of what I had thought I should say.
They were busy.
They both had opinions.
But did you feel intimidated or?
No, I thought it was funny and they were helping me.
Well, great. I'm proud of you. And you did that quite a few times then, not only the state Supreme Court.
I had several dozen cases in Washington and hundreds in the state Supreme Court.
All right. Well, then, let's see. Now, we have you on the National Labor Relations Board, and we have you having been in the Public Service Commission. Where from the National Labor Relations Board?
Well, I wasn't on the National Board.
Oh, you weren't on the board.
Oh.
But
the
you
National
tried
Board
the case.
Came into existence after the national law was passed. And they were appointees of the federal government.
Oh, all right. But you tried cases relating to it. All right. I've got you.
They were parties.
All right. Okay.
In other words, they are a regulatory body. They did the regulating that the Wisconsin Employment Relations Board had previously done here.
I see. All right. Now, over the time that you were practicing law, did you see many changes in the types of people who became lawyers or in court procedure? Or we've already talked about the fact now there are more women, of course. Now there are quite a few women lawyers.
Yes, there are. I think it's true still that there are not very many women who are leaders of the bar. I think there's a certain prejudice on the part of men who would be clients but prefer to have a man as their lawyer.
And of course now we have those several women judges right here.
Oh, yes.
So that's good.
We have a woman judge on our state Supreme Court.
And then our federal judge, as well as county judges. All right. In addition to your career as a lawyer, you did much for the community. I know you received honors, and I used to go to Matrix dinners, and you were usually either featured there or cited there for something. And I remember that, among other things, you were on the Police and Fire Commission for the City of Madison. What does that commission do? I assume it's still going, or what did it do?
Well, it's a supervisory body of the whole police and fire department. They make the appointments of policemen and adopt the regulations that are to govern it. And they proceed in hiring and firing. However, they asked the Police and Fire Commission to help conduct the examinations for people that wanted to enter the departments. And we did occasionally.
Do you have any anecdote in connection with that you remember? Anything exciting?
Well, it was exciting all the time because there would be problems that came up in the department, and I remember we had a few skirmishes. I don't remember specifically which one right now. but I know we did have arguments. And
You'd be bound to, I think.
I bet
You'd be bound to have some,
Oh, yes.
personnel or otherwise, or policy.
We had a few rather upsetting arguments among our own selves when we were meeting after an examination or something, and found that we were in disagreement.
Inevitable. Right. Then another thing I also remember is that you headed the Civic Music Association. What is your particular interest in music, and what did that association do, or what does it do?
Well, I had studied music long enough so that I had given some recitals in college. And,
What kind of music?
well, my last was violin. I had had a good many piano lessons and some voice lessons, but the violin was the last. I guess I was not terribly active in college in music, but I continued to study there. So when I graduated, I had belonged to Mu Phi Epsilon, which was at that time an honorary musical sorority. I don't know whether it's still in existence, but anyhow, we had a rather active alumni chapter, and we got acquainted with all the local Madison professionals, and so that after a while, when I had time, I had joined the association, and very shortly afterwards I was elected to the board, and then I became president.
What does the board do?
Well, the board advises it was Roland Johnson at the time, and his wife mostly, them what kind of program they want. And they meet regularly to discuss the business affairs too, finances and that sort of thing. So it's just like a board of directors, really.
Right. Well, then I have another one on my list, and that's the Daughters of the American Revolution, the DAR. You were on the board for that too, weren't you?
That's right. I belonged to the chapter for quite a while, and then I was elected to the board. We were quite active, and they always had a program of some kind, or a plan to do things for the community. We participated in when we had the new citizens admitted to citizenship. We always ran a little reception for that. Otherwise, of course, most of the program was concerned with history, historic things. Country Club, Madison Club, and that sort of thing, because we had quite a few acquaintances, and it was a nice place to entertain.
Right. Bea, I want to tell you how much I admire the fact that you could combine a happy, successful family life, raise two wonderful children, that you could have an outstanding career, and that you gave to your community freely of your time and your intelligence. And there are a lot of people can't achieve all that. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, it was luck, but it was not just luck. Can you give any reason for it? I know you had a good time, too. I've been with you when we've had a good time.
Well, I was fortunate, I think, in my husband. He was quite a bit older than I, but he was a good deal more sociable than I. He was the one that was always ready for a party. And he was fond of children, too, so after we had our son, we started looking around for a possible child to adopt, because it was apparent that we were going to have more than one. And he was all in favor of it. So our daughter was adopted, and a very successful adoption.
Oh,
we were
yes.
so lucky.
Yes. Well, Do you have any advice for women these days? We hear about these super mothers, quote, who are trying it all. You tried it all and you succeeded. Now, one thing then, you credit your husband. You credit what else?
Well, I think luck does enter into it, no matter how much you would try to protest, because the openings just come at the time when you need them. Of course, I prepared for my legal career by taking secretarial work. I had to enter by the back door, as it were. So I started as a secretary before I was appointed as assistant city attorney. And I think you have to find where the opportunity is, even if it's not as good as you would like.
Right away. And then wait and work for it. Of course, you had good grades, you worked hard, you were conscientious. I assume you had good health.
Well, yes, most of the time. I've had my ups and downs that way, as most people do.
Yes, but on the whole, you must have been pretty sturdy to have endured all that.
Probably so.
Right.
I have had several episodes in the hospital for operations and such.
And good children. Good children.
Oh, yes.
That you're proud of.
Oh, very proud of. I think that was another lucky thing.
Right.
Our son is a very outstanding engineer, civil engineer. Our daughter has her MFA, Master of Fine Arts, from the University of Wisconsin. She's married to a professor at the University of Minnesota and has gone on with him on 3 foreign assignments for AID, Administration for Industrial Development. Right now, she's in Africa. Won't be home until June.
Well, that I call the full life. B, in summary, as you look back, is there any case that you tried that you remember either because of its longevity or its significance or its stress, anything as you think back? I'm sure they were all a challenge.
Well, there are a good many cases that I think of as important and do remember as interesting. But for the longevity, I think perhaps Allis-Chalmers' strike case was about as long as most any of them. I was in Milwaukee most of the winter trying the case, and I had a suite at the hotel because I couldn't pack enough to last me. The company was trying to continue operation, and the union was trying to prevent it. And in doing so, they violated board orders by attacking employees who wanted to work. So we had, I think, 40-some defendants, and they were very interesting. They kept writing me notes about how, how I should be more, broad-minded.
No. Did they physically abuse people,
Yes.
strike breakers?
Yes, enough to try to discourage them from working.
Well, right. Well, if you were giving career advice or just general advice to a young woman today who came to you because of your success, what would you say, let's say, about entering law as a career? Now, this is 1987, over 30 years after you entered.
Well, I think practice of law is very satisfying. I don't know that it would be for everybody. It was to me because I don't know, I just had focused on it. But actually, the world of business still is dominated as much by men as any other. So that I think there is a better than average chance for a man to succeed than for a woman. I'm not sure. Certainly women have done a great job in the government angle of it. There are so many judges and women who are helping to formulate the laws, so that a woman can look for a very full life in the practice of law now.
Well, to me, it just through osmosis, I think it's such a wonderful career. You're helping people, and you're really trying to make our country a just place. And after all, if our world doesn't have justice, we're never going to have peace. So I look at it as one of the most significant contributions anybody could make. And I thank you for all you've done and for this interview.